On today's episode of the podcast, we'll be listening to a conversation I had with Sid Jacobson for the Help Jerry Seavey Heal fundraiser that we did. There was such an overwhelming response, people wanting to be on this fundraiser to raise money for Jerry Seavey, that we didn't listen to the entire conversation. We had to trim it down. So I wanted you to be able to hear the whole thing. And so that's what we have for you today. By the way, we're still trying to raise money for Jerry Seavey, so please feel free to donate now or anytime is convenient for you. There's links below, and we always appreciate it. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. Sid Jacobson, nice to see you again.
You too, Doug. Great to be here. Thank you.
And just for the record, I'm bundled up here in cold upstate New York, and you're in New Orleans?
I'm in New Orleans, also a little cool down here. It's getting a little warmer today, but we've had some cold weather too. So I'm a little bundled, and you can hear I have a little bit of a cold too. So
can you define cold weather for New Orleans?
Well, it got down to the upper 30s overnight a few times, and then mostly it's been in the 40s and 50s and stuff. Yeah, that's cold for New Orleans. It will get in New Orleans down actually into the teens every now and then, not for very long, but usually over the winter time we'll get a couple of nights where it goes down into the 20s and stuff.
And snow occasionally too, right? I've heard of snow
every 5 or 6 years we'll get snow, something like that, usually for a couple of hours, and that's about it. The longest snow we've ever had, as long as I lived here, lasted about a day and a half, maybe 2 days. It was on Christmas Day a number of years ago, but other than that, we've never had snow that lasted more than a few hours. It just doesn't happen very long. Of course, being in New Orleans, as soon as it snows, everybody gets in their cars and tries to drive on it, which they have no experience in. So it's always fun to watch. We stay home then and just hear about it later as the number of accidents increases, exponentially.
I'm from the city of Buffalo in New York State.
Just got 6 feet of snow. Right?
Yes, yeah. Parts of the city got 6 feet of snow, literally, and yeah, crazy. I mean, they were measuring it and comparing it to the heights of different Buffalo Bills football players.
That's hysterical. That's great. I love it. How high was it? Oh, it's the left tackle, Oh, that's great.
Fortunately, I am not anywhere near there, so we have no snow here in this part of New York State. Thankfully.
That's good. I don't expect we'll have any this year either. We haven't really had a winter the last 2 years at all. We just had a freeze a couple of nights last year. The year before, we didn't have any. So I've still got plants that have been out there for.
Oh, no kidding. Seriously. Yeah. Wow. That's cool.
Yeah, flowers. Yeah, it's bizarre. Yeah.
Hey, so we could talk about this all day.
Yeah, we could. Yeah. But we've got work to do.
Yes. Yes. Damn it. So no, seriously, this is a fundraiser. And we're putting the fun in fundraising theoretically. So we're here to talk about fun things, or at least some semblance of something would be interesting.
And always willing to help out Mary Lou and Jerry too, because Mary Lou I've known on and off for years, and they're good people, so I can use the help. Anybody who can help out, that's a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, we could also get into that subject. The fact that this needed care for Jerry is out of Maryland's pocket is weird.
It's, people in other countries might see this and go, we don't understand the US.
Well,
we just don't how is this possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really they do. I've talked to them and they are saying exactly that. And so, yeah.
It's funny. I'll just throw this in. My wife and I we've had two experiences like this. We travel a lot, and we were just in Indonesia for a month. We just got back a couple of weeks ago, and she got a sinus infection the first time in 25 years or something. And we found where the clinic was, at the hotel. They said, just go, it wasn't far. And he said, well, we kind of need a ride. It was really raining like crazy there the whole time we were there. And I called the clinic. They said, oh, we'll provide transportation. I said, really? I said, oh, yeah. So what's the charge? Oh, no. We just provide transportation. Said, oh, okay. And they came in an ambulance, basically. It was sort of a modified station wagon, really, state of the art, but small. It wasn't like a whole ambulance like we have normally. And then they drove us to the clinic, and we waited for a little while and saw this doctor who was just one of the loveliest people we've ever seen. She was just lovely, just sweet and kind. And she got exactly the same care she would have gotten here, and prescribed exactly the same antibiotic and, cough medicine and a couple other things. And, take this for 5 days and you'll be okay. And I don't remember what it cost. It might've been $20, something like that. We don't see that here. It was almost free, and the same care we get here in the US, and they drove us both ways, for just to do it. They just took us to and from where we were staying. It was just insane that we don't have that, and that we have to do things like this. But it's an opportunity for us to talk anyway. Maybe some people will get some enjoyment out of that.
Nice reframe there, Sid.
Yeah. I tried. I was trained.
Yes,
People
you were
trained me years
trained
ago.
in NLP from the
back in the 1920s. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't quite that far back, but it was the 70s, right? You were early.
It was the 70s, the late 70s. Yeah.
And did they come to you? They came to New Orleans, right?
They came to New Orleans. So it was the second NLP practitioner training program. They'd had some other training programs, but the second NLP practitioner training program was in New Orleans. Wow. Hilton Hotel, May of 1978, 140 people. Huh. And you mentioned that you've already had a talk with Connie Ray Andreas, so she was there with Steve at the time.
Were they part of the training team?
They were part of the audience. So Steve and I sat next to each other with our tape recorders in between us on a chair, taping our four guru teachers, Richard Bandler and John Grinder and Judy Delosier and Leslie Cameron Bandler. Wow. And It was great training. It was an interesting training. I don't know if I told you this before. We were in a giant ballroom, and it was big enough to set up 3 stages in the room. So at one end, there was a stage, and then at each side, there were stages sort of facing the middle. And back then, it was 78. They didn't have tons of information like we do now. You could never do, people try to do practitioner programs in 6 days. I guess Richard can do it, but, it's not the same program. And so they knew a few things back there. The only books that were out at the time were the Structure of Magic Volume 1 and 2, and the Patterns books, Patterns 1 and 2, and that was it.
When was Fox and the Princess written?
Shortly after that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was about within the next year or so, something like that. I don't remember the date, but that was one of the next books. And then Robert's NLP Volume 1 came out. It has all their names on it, but that was actually Robert's book.
Right. Is this something I think you said?
Yeah, it was his master's. It was his undergraduate honors thesis is what it was. Yeah. So the training was interesting, though, because we started together. All 140 of us were together, and the 4 of them, I think I mentioned this to you before, the 4 of them walked to the front of the stage and started talking together. So it was a quadruple hypnotic induction, all 4 of them talking simultaneously, and you couldn't follow. And everybody, 140 of us woke up 6 days later at the end, but what they did was interesting, because there were some people who had some training with them, and some who had a good bit of training with them. So there were 25 people out of that 140 that they had identified and Richard took them off to some other part of the hotel. So we didn't see Richard or them a lot of the time. We saw him a few times when everybody would come together. Richard would come to teach something, but most of the time they were gone. So John and Judy and Leslie were teaching in the big room, and they were doing different kinds of topics. Judy and Leslie were doing mostly stuff for people who hadn't had any NLP. So it was more basic kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Leslie did a thing on family therapy, and Judy taught metaphor. I still have the tape of that, of Judy teaching how to do metaphor for an afternoon. Yeah, I've still got it. I sent her a copy years ago. She was flabbergasted and thrilled all at once. So they did these different topical things, and I ended up with John for almost 3 solid days doing nothing but strategies. Just strategies, almost 3 full days. It was like 2.5 days. And then John did a whole thing on hypnotic induction one morning. The whole morning was just on induction patterns. And that's all in Transformations, the book Transformations, just transcribed in there. And then Richard did a whole bunch of stuff that afternoon on utilization patterns. And a lot of that's in that book too, and some other places too,
wow.
I believe.
So that must be where Steve Andreas was recording, because a lot of those transcriptions are from.
Yeah, right next to me. Yeah, we had tape recorders on the same chair in between us.
That's
and,
so interesting.
we shared the chair.
I was just talking to Connie Ray about, how they came to write this book. And I told her, and I believe this is true, that it really was a huge, if not seminal contribution of theirs, of Steve Andreas and Connie Ray to create those books.
Yeah, beyond words. I don't have any. Yeah, I mean, even being through the training, those books for me are such great references.
Yeah.
I have to say too, the book that they did without Bandler and Grinder, Heart of the Mind, is still one of my favorite books. People would say, "Oh, that's old stuff." It's great stuff. Yeah. It's like the self-help manual for people in NLP. Every chapter is a technique, and it's a how-to, and then a set of instructions along with a demonstration. I mean, it was a great book. All those books were terrific. And I know that they were a lot of work because they make it look like it was a workshop that they transcribed, but it didn't work that way. I mean, They were taking bits and pieces of lots of different things. And Steve, I guess Steve did most of the editing. I don't know. Maybe Connie Ray and Steve did it together.
I think actually the way Connie Ray described it yesterday is that Frogs and the Princes was mostly Steve's book, because he undertook the editing.
Right.
And then she did Transformations. So she was more.
Really?
Yeah, she was more interested in the hypnosis.
That's interesting to know. Interesting to hear, because I couldn't tell the difference. They're both edited brilliantly. I thought they were just fantastic. And frankly,
I will say, having written a book that I thought would be really simple to do, because I was going to take my own transcripts of my own self speaking into a microphone for the tape set that I did for Sleight of Mouth. I thought I would just have that transcribed, and then boom, I've got a book.
Not really.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it doesn't come off very well when you do it that way. No, it doesn't. There's some things that you got to fix, you got to edit, you have to rework things around and stuff. And so, no, it's a big job, and it's interesting because I haven't seen Connie Ray for a long time, but she's done some great work too. The stuff that she did, the book that she did with her sister on core transformations with Tamara Andres. And I don't know Tamara, but it's just a great book. It's just a great book. And I'm plugging these books because there are a lot of people, even people in NLP, who've never heard of these books. They don't know about them.
Right.
And it's just the literature of NLP is rich. It's filled with some great stuff. The problem with it is it's so big that people often start in the wrong place. Frogs and the Princes, for you or I, people who are therapists or have that kind of background, or even an educational background like yours, we can make some sense out of it. But I remember that may have been the very first time I did a presentation for a strictly industry group. And this was for the API Trainers Committee. API is American Petroleum Institute, not everybody's favorite organization. But what's interesting is they have a trainers committee, and it's all training managers from all the different oil companies. And in that room, they are non-competitive, and they're not out to, all they're trying to do is keep people safe, train people to use equipment properly, train people, everything from their computers to the stuff that, it turns oil into gasoline to everything else. And they are very supportive of one another. It was a very interesting thing because I went to these meetings 5 or 6 times over a period of time. Being in New Orleans, I'm in the oil patch, right? The oil patch is Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas to some extent. And so all these meetings were in that area, right? So Texas and Louisiana most of the time. And so I went to a bunch of these meetings because I could drive to them. And I was invited. You have to be invited to go. So I would go as a guest of the guy who's the head of the trainers committee, or one of the other people. And I remember doing a presentation for them, and it was very interesting because I got near the end of it, and they really enjoyed it. And they loved, because I was talking about learning and stuff that was very relevant for trainers, and trainers love NLP, of course. And one of them raised their hands and said, we've been hearing about NLP for a while, and we tried to read this book called Frogs into Princes. You got anything other than that we could read? I said, well, yeah, actually, there's a book I think I wrote that maybe you could read that would be a little easier, And I told them to get a copy of Medication Volume 1, my first book, because they would relate to it, because it was about teaching and learning. And even though it was about kids, the principles would be the same. This is thank you, because they'd all tried to get through Frogs into Princes. They couldn't. It was that's out of their bailiwick.
That's just really interesting to me, because I thought what I was saying before is that like patterns 1, patterns 2 are, they're kind of academic kind of book.
They're dense. Yeah, they're hard to get through.
But Frogs and Princess for me was like, oh wow, this is almost like a page turner. I mean, I could really.
That's what I'm saying for you and me. But you get into a group of engineers in the oil industry, and they go, "What are these people talking about?"
Really fascinating.
The idea of doing demonstrations and doing reframing with people and stuff. They're like, "What are you? What does this?"
Wow. So how did they? I mean, by the way, plugging books that people should read. Your medications books are fabulous. They're really.
Thank you.
I mean, they're really super clear and like you said, kind of handbooks of techniques to do. I thought they were great.
Well, I always tell people, I mean, the only gift I have in writing is that I can make things very clear and simple, because that's the way I think. Because
that's a huge
if it ain't clear and simple in my head, I don't get it. So I'm a simpleton, basically. Honestly, I'm a linear thinker. I have to do things that way. People say, oh, linear thinkers are stupid. Well, okay, I'm stupid, but I can at least write it down and other people can follow the steps. So that's the way I think. There has to be that. I mean, all of my books are how-to books. And if you look at genres, there are self-help books, right? And I do how-to books. Those are different things. A how-to book will include steps to do to achieve something, right? And it could be, how to plant a garden or how to fix your car.
Right.
I do how to help a child who's got a learning problem, how to reestablish a relationship with your kids when they've had trouble, or how to write a book, in the book, The Power Process, that I did with Dixie Hickman, who's a college writing instructor, or how to solve problems in business, my solution states books. They're how-to books. That's what I do. I'm not doing great tomes. I'm not doing great literature. Not my intention. And nor am I capable of that. I've never tried.
Well, maybe why I like them so much, because I think my brain works in a very similar way. I think that's one of the things that NLP has given us, in a sense, because it took things like Ericksonian hypnosis and it gave you like steps to do things like that. And it sort of codified things that might have been beyond me if it hadn't been for the NLP inroad to that But also my Sleight of Mouth book is kind of like that. When I got Robert Diltz's book, I learned Sleight of Mouth from Robert Diltz and
Sure.
Todd Epstein at a master practitioner training in like in 85, 86 in
Yeah.
Santa Cruz. Then when his book came out, the Sleight of Mouth book came out of Robert Diltz, I thought, great, this is going to be so good. And like,
Yeah.
it was
It's a
fascinating.
different way to, yeah, but Bobby's brain doesn't work exactly the same as everybody else's.
Yeah.
And he's contributed an entire literature all by himself.
Oh yeah.
And it's
Amazing. Amazing.
valuable stuff to read. And some of it's
Fantastic.
difficult and some of it's easy,
But the
you know?
reason I wrote my book is so that people could understand how to do sleight of mouth. It's called The
Yes,
User's Guide. It's a how-to book. So,
sure. And
so
I
I
think
think
it's,
I think you and I have a similar affliction.
well, and if you think about NLP is a how-to technology,
That's what I'm
right?
saying. Yeah.
I mean, you take, yeah, something like Ericsson, what Ericsson was doing, or Fritz Perls or Virginia, and try to put this into something that people can do. You know, I don't know if we talked about this before, but you know, I started off as a Gestalt therapist
Oh
when I
yeah.
was in my master's training to get my master's in social work.
Is that what
And
originally drew you to NLP because of the connection with Fritz Perls?
uh, I'll tell you the story. It's more accidental than that.
Okay.
We
Well,
had
continue on
in
with the first story.
yeah, it's in my training in social work. You have a field placement when you're in social work. You actually work in the field at an agency somewhere. And I was working in the French Quarter at a mental health center, and our field instructor, who had the seven of us students around the table with him, was a budding Gestalt therapist. I mean, he'd been a social worker for probably 30 years. He'd been a professor for 25.
Hmm.
And he had taken a Gestalt therapy course a couple of years before, and he transcribed the whole thing. He just wrote down everything that happened in the course. And that's what he taught us. As if you can teach Gestalt therapy by, you know, here, just
Yeah.
look at the blackboard. It doesn't work that way, of course. So we did a Gestalt group as well. And we had our own group, I think, once or twice a week in our field placement. We got together and did Gestalt work with each other, and he kind of monitored and drove us. So I knew a lot about Gestalt. And near the end of that training, one of the other students uh, went to a workshop at the Gestalt Institute in New Orleans. And she came back high as a kite, talking about these two guys that had done this training at the Gestalt Institute named Bandler and Grinder. And I went, tell me about these guys. This was 1977, right? So, and she was telling us about the stuff that she'd learned. And I'm like, keep going, you know, tell me more about this. What, you know? And it was fascinating stuff. And I said, well, I'm going to sign up and continue my Gestalt training at the Gestalt Institute when I finish school, which we did just a few months later. So graduated in December, and I started Gestalt training in February. The first workshop was Greg Brodsky, who was a friend of Richard's and Leslie's and John and Judy in Santa Cruz. So Greg is a guy from Santa Cruz. He's still in Santa Cruz. He's an amazing guy. He's a genius, brilliant guy. And they sent him to do training because the Gestalt Institute people wanted Richard and John to come back and do another workshop in February, and they couldn't. They had a schedule conflict, and they sent Greg. Said, here, take Greg. Greg will do a great job. And he did this awesome workshop. I mean, I don't have enough words. There aren't any words for how great this workshop was. And he started off saying, I'm going to show you how Gestalt works, because you've all probably noticed that some of you are, you know, better at it than others, and sometimes your work works and sometimes it falls apart. I'm going to show you. And he did. And he gave us all these things about, you know, anchoring. He said it's about states and state dependent learning. And I went, wait, I learned about state dependent learning. I know about all this stuff. And so, and then Richard and John and Judy and Leslie were coming back like 3 months later, or in May, so 4 months later, to do their workshop. So I signed up for that practitioner program. So that's how I got into it. It was sort of accidental. And it was really just through meeting this person and then wanting to continue my Gestalt training. So
Right.
that's how I got into it, because a lot of Gestalt therapists weren't interested in NLP because they thought it was too mechanical, and some of them were afraid because it was too powerful, and some of them because they thought it was too complicated, you know, which I didn't. I thought it was fine. So that's sort of how I got into it, and I just stuck with it. And Richard was personal friends with the person who ran the Gestalt Institute down here. So he would come down to visit. He did a few other little workshops, and he would just come down to visit. And I became one of their trainers, like almost immediately when I finished my training. So by the end of 78, I was a Gestalt trainer, as well as, being into NLP. And then Richard, we got to be a little closer, just socially. And then in 1980, I think he said, well, I got to make you a trainer. We're going to do this training out here, come out, and, it'll be in 2 parts, and you just come out to Santa Cruz. So I did that. And I think I might have mentioned this to you before. There were only 3 of us out of this group of 60 that they made trainers. It was a sort of a combination master practitioner trainer training program. And there was a lot of stuff on stage skills, and there was all the stuff on submodalities. The submodality distinctions were brand new then, right? They knew about submodalities. They didn't know what to do with them. And speaking of David Gordon, David's book in the back of the metaphor book, Therapeutic Metaphors, which is a great book. If anybody hearing my voice, if you do nothing else and you haven't read that book, that's only a suggestion. I'm only a hypnotist, right? So in the back, there's a whole thing on submodalities, but it's just using them in metaphor, just to make metaphors richer. But then later, they discovered, wait, you make the picture brighter and things change, or bigger, smaller, all that stuff. So that was the first training group where they were actually training people to use submodalities to do things. And they just developed the swish patterns. So we were learning to do those. And it was great fun training, but they only made 3 of us trainers out of that. Richard said, there were 3 people who, I want to be trainers. The rest are going to be master practitioners.
So who besides you? Who besides was plucked from the?
What was? You're asking me. I'm embarrassed because my brain is not working well because I have this cold. But you remember Joseph Yeager? Yeager?
Yeah.
His girlfriend at the time. I don't know whose name will come up with it at some point.
Okay.
But she was the other one who was made a trainer. And then there was another woman that was brand new to NLP, and he made her a trainer for some reason we could never figure out. And then she disappeared. Nobody ever saw her again. So I don't know what happened with her. So it was just myself and this other person who was a good trainer. She was real good. And so, it just kind of stuck with it. But there were things even in those early trainings that with the practitioner training and the training with Greg, things like state-dependent learning that you and I have talked about before that are so key to everything that we do that most people in NLP trainings aren't even doing anymore. And it's such a simple concept, and it's so central. And I always remember the first time, talk about crazy stories, the first time I ever learned about state-dependent learning was in my undergraduate work in psychology. We had this great psychology professor when I went to school at Tulane. And he was not just a great teacher, he was the best researcher in the department, in the psychology department. And he was a terrific guy. I mean, everybody loved this guy. He was just a great teacher and just a great person. And he did something interesting right before the midterms. He said, as a teacher, as anybody who does instruction at any level, when I give you a test, I have a problem that I'm introducing immediately. And the problem is this: I'm testing 2 things. Some of you are great test takers. You're just great. You figure out how to do tests, and you can just, work your way through. Even if you don't know the stuff that well, you always do great. Others of you will know the stuff cold, and you'll sit down at the desk and forget your own name, and you can't do anything, kind of like my brain is right now, right? And he said, so I'm testing how good a test taker you are, as well as how well you've studied and learned the information. He says, I don't care how good a test taker you are. I'm not interested in testing you for that. So what I do before the midterm, every time I teach a class, is I'm going to teach this entire class today on test taking, because I want to level the playing field. I want to make all of you much better test takers.
Cool.
And we're all going, where have you been all my life? Yes, bring it on, buddy. And he taught us all this stuff about, how to think, how to guess, when not to guess, percentages, and, looking at a multiple choice test. He said, if you got 4 choices, A, B, C, and D, the chances are psychologically it's going to be more B and C, because that's where people try to hide things. If they're doing it, they don't know it, and stuff like that. And he said, if you can eliminate 2, then it's worth guessing. If you're not sure, don't guess, because there was actually points off for wrong answers,
Oh, okay.
as well as points for right answers. So,
Right.
it kind of it makes it a little trickier, right? But so it said it's worth it to go for the points, or you're better off leaving it blank than getting the negative, right? So all this stuff. And he said, but here's the most important thing. He says, there's a rumor going around this campus that some people, the night before a test, will stay up all night studying. And to do that, they'll take amphetamines. Now, I know none of the 275 of you would possibly ever do that. The whole
Never.
place
Not
cracks
do that.
up, right? We're all rolling on the floor. People are looking in their pockets. Yep, right here, got them. So it was pretty standard practice back then. Now, unfortunately, people are still doing it, right? But he said, I'm not going to make any judgment about this. He says, I'm going to treat you guys as adults. You're in college, you're college students. I'm going to treat you as adults. This is a decision you have to make as an adult. He said, personally, I would rather you didn't take those drugs, because I don't think they're good for you. But realistically, they're probably not going to hurt you that bad, and you're going to make the decision for yourself. But here's the dumbest thing you can do. This test is going to be 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The dumbest thing you can do is take those drugs, stay up and study all night, sleep it off in the morning, come in relaxed and refreshed with no drugs left in your system, and try to take this test. You will remember nothing. That if you're going to study all night on this drug, you have to take the test on the drug. He said, take the pill 1.5 hours before, so the drug is in your system. You'll be in the same state of mind, the same state of consciousness you were in while you were studying, and you will have access to all that information, because that's the way we work.
State dependent.
What you learn will be dependent on the state you're in, whether or not you can remember it, right? He said, if you're going to stay up all night on coffee, drink coffee for the test. You're going to stay up all night on willpower, come in tired on willpower, right? If you're going to not stay up, if you're going to be relaxed and comfortable when you study, be relaxed and comfortable when you take the test.
Yeah.
And you have to duplicate the state. It's the most important thing, more important than any of the things I've shown you about testing.
Wow.
And so that's great. So of course, NLP comes along. We go, here's my drug. It's called an anchor, and all you have to do is get yourself into a good state, anchor it really well, and future pace, and you're there.
Studying in that state and being in that state. There was a funny episode, by the way, on Grace and Frankie. I don't know if you ever watched that show, but
I know the show. I didn't watch it very often.
Frankie is played by Lily Tomlin, and she's like an old hippie, so she, does mushrooms and smokes pot. And
I saw about the first 5 or 6 episodes or so. It's funny.
And there's one episode where she's trying to, get her driver's license returned to her, because she'd been taken away for some reason. So she's studying for this test, and she's smoking pot the whole time that she's studying. And then she goes in to take the test, the written test, and just flunks it every time. Doesn't
know why.
Yeah. And so finally, I think her son says, well, you got to smoke pot before you take the test. You got to go in the same state. And so she did, and she was like, hey, where's the table?
Yeah, right. That's fine, right?
But she passed the test in flying colors. Yeah, absolutely.
That's so funny. It's, there was I'll tell you another crazy story about that. Years ago, my whole family got together for Thanksgiving, I think it was. And so we flew up. I'm from the Chicago area. So we flew up, and we're all at my brother's house, and my dad and mom are there, and my wife and I, and then nieces and nephews and stuff. And 3 nieces. My brother Steve has 1 daughter, Emily, and my brother Dick had 2 daughters, Michelle and Rachel. all three are really smart, and they're just genius kids. And they nothing but A's the whole time they were in school, and they're almost the same age. I mean, Rachel is the oldest, and then Emily's a year behind, and then Michelle's a year behind. And they always got nothing but straight A's, and they skipped classes and stuff. I mean, they skipped grades. I mean, the whole thing. They're really brilliant. And we're getting ready to go out. Everybody's going to go out to dinner. And they said, but the girls have to study. They need about 45 minutes because they've got stuff to do. And then we're going to go out to dinner, and that's all they have to do for the whole weekend. And once they're done, then that's great. So we said, okay, let them study. So they go into a den, and the rest of us go in another room, and they crank up the stereo. We were joking before about putting on records. They crank it up, and they're listening to Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. This is back in the day. There's teenagers. They're all grown now. So, and they crank this up, and I peek in, and they're literally walking and dancing, and with their notebooks and stuff and books, and they're up and moving and literally dancing to Britney Spears doing math homework and stuff.
Wow.
And my dad is freaking out. He says, they possibly study, possibly, I can't even think with that racket. That's so, I can't even think straight. What's going on? Look at them. They're supposed to be sitting down. And I said, well, listen, Dad, just hang on, Dad. I know I can't study like that either. And I know you can't study like that. That's not how we work. But how are they doing in school? And he goes, okay, I guess they're doing something right. I said, well, yeah, they're straight A students. They're brilliant. He says, so I guess maybe we'll just leave them alone. He says, okay, we'll leave them alone. And later, as an illustration for him, I said, Dad, we're going to ask Emily this question. He said, I just want you to notice what happens, because I explained state-dependent learning to him. And he was a brilliant man too. He was a trained chemist, but he didn't know a lot about psychology, but he got it right away. Mm-hmm. And I said, Emily, just curious, you're listening to Christina Aguilera here and Britney Spears. When you go to take your test, do you hear them in your head? She looks at me and goes, well, duh, Uncle Sid. And I went, okay. And my dad goes, that's right. They're carrying the information over along with the music. It's like controls their state, and they can manage it. She just looks, duh. Okay, I got it. They'll tell us. Sometimes the kids they come up on this stuff themselves. They learn.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you should talk about state like that, because in reading and studying, I was not very long ago, honestly. It was relatively recently. I had a little bit of a breakthrough. I'm glad I'm learning
quick. I need one.
Glad I'm learning about learning now. But I try to get reading done. I've been listening to books on Audible, which has been really good. I've gone through books a lot faster that way. But then I was thinking, why I have these books I want to read. They're not available on audio, like Uncommon Therapy, Jay Haley. I want to read this book, I can't listen to it, and I want to read this. I got a number of books in that category. And yet when I sit down and read, I just kind of read a page or two, and then I start getting sleepy, and so it takes me forever.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, okay. It takes me forever to read a book. And then I remembered many years ago, Tony Robbins talked about speed reading. And for him, it wasn't so much about a technique from the speed reading people, but it was about getting into a peak state where it's like, okay, now I'm going to read. I'm going to devour this book and read. And, he'd do it standing up, and, and he'd just go through the book as fast as he can in that sort of state that he put himself into. And I've tried that, and it is a much better way for me to read a book that I want to actually, read rather than listen to.
I may know where that came from.
Oh, really?
I'm not positive, because he may have learned this some other way. But,
well, this is a long time ago. But so I know you're
a long time ago.
Okay, all right.
A long time ago.
Go ahead.
I think Richard and Robert, maybe some of the other ones, they modeled this guy who
Oh.
was well known. He was a speed reader. He could read, like 50,000 words a minute kind of thing. And this is what he did. They
Ah,
modeled this guy. They spent time with him
that
and say,
makes
what do you
sense.
do? And he would pick up the book and he'd put it back down. And he would have to get ready. I mean, he would walk back and forth, put it up and slam it down and he'd do this. And then when he was ready to go, he just would just devour the thing.
Sounds
And he
identical.
read, yeah, like a million miles an hour. And sometimes you read the book 4 or 5 times, just to get all the stuff in. He'd go through it over and over and over again, but he was doing it so fast. And I think that may also be where some of the ideas from photo reading came from. I don't know if you ever did a photo reading course, but it's
I never
fascinating
did.
course.
I never did, but I will say that I know a lot about it. I never took the course, but I know a lot. You found it? Have you taken the course? Did you find it fascinating?
I sponsored the course twice down here because I wanted to take it and I wanted to learn more about it. And I sponsored it twice. And we had a great teacher. And she did these interesting things. Apparently, they do this on all the photo reading courses, but it's sort of the convincers that you need to know that it's working.
Hmm.
So, for anybody listening to this, photo reading is not speed reading. Speed reading might get you up to about 10,000 words a minute if you're really good at it. Photo reading, you start at 25,000 words a minute and go up. So, you're literally reading as quickly as you can turn the page. Now, one of the things that you have to do is you have to have a way to turn the page fast enough. So you turn it differently. And this is something I remember Richard talking about way back when in the Evelyn Woods reading course, which was like the original speed reading course. They had you, when you sat down to read, you would reach over the top of the page and turn the page. As Grinder told us this. Why? Because everybody, when they start doing speed reading, the moment they turn the page the way they normally would, that's an anchor to go back to your old method.
Uh-huh.
So they built in a physical anchor for the new method, basically, which
Hmm.
replaces the anchor for the old one. So you have to do the same thing in photo reading. So you have to physically do something different. That's where all this physical stuff around the reading becomes important, right? Because you're interrupting the old anchors that you have by replacing them with a whole new system of
Cool.
holding the book. The
Yeah.
other thing that she did with us was she did a couple of things, but the most interesting thing was she passed out pocket dictionaries, and you visualize a dictionary on the inside. There's 4 columns, right? Because each page was like split into half. So there's a bunch of definitions in another, and then more on the other page. So you're looking at 4 columns of information. And she said, I want you to speed read this for 90 seconds or photo read it for 90 seconds, right? And photo reading means you have to go into a very specific state. Most of the course is teaching you how to go into this very specific state where you visualize a certain way. And it's a very specific trance state. So she said, I have speed, photo read this for 90 seconds. And you're reading about a page a second. I got to about page 100 in 90 seconds. She said, now put it down. Now, when you've done that, you have no idea consciously what you just did because your conscious mind can't follow that quickly. You don't even clearly see what you're reading, right? So you don't have any idea what you just read. So she said, here's what I want you to do as a test for yourself. I want you to think of a word that would have been in the part that you read. So if you read like the first half of the dictionary, think of a word that starts with, the first half of the alphabet. And just close your eyes and visualize the word and see it on the page where you believe that it was. And now pick up the book and open the book and see if that's where it is. And we did it 3 times, and all 3 times the word was exactly on the page where I had visualized it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an accident. Everybody in the room was like that.
Cool.
Everybody was seeing the word exactly where it was on the page. So we knew it was in there, right? Then the trick is how to activate it afterwards. And I don't remember what this guy did. The guy was attacking the book and all that stuff. I don't remember how he activated the information. So we know it's there in your head, but you have to do something to get it back out into your consciousness,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because it's not the way that we normally read. So I had one of my students had actually taken this course before I brought somebody down. She'd gone somewhere to do it. And she was a college student when she took it. It was her first year of college. She was a very bright girl as well. She was 15 when she went to college. And she didn't have any money. So the first few days of school, she got the list of all the books she was supposed to buy, and she went and sat in the bookstore and photo read all the books.
Huh.
Like 3 or 4 or 5 times, till sometimes they just kick her out because she was in the way, right? But
Right.
she photo read all the textbooks for this semester, everything, 4 or 5 times, went through them, and then just activated and everything like she was supposed to. And she got nothing but straight A's. She never went back to those books for the whole semester. And that's how she did college. She would just photo read all the stuff.
Huh.
So we have this capacity, and learning how to use it is really cool. The most interesting thing was, and surveying all the people who took those classes that we had, because there were like 75 or 80 people in between the 2 classes that did it. They all said the same thing. They all knew how to photo read at the end, because you really did learn how to do it. And most of us weren't doing it, but it changed the way we read so dramatically that we were thrilled with what we'd learned. I don't read the same way that I did before that. I can if I want to. I kept it as a choice, because I'm one of those people who grew up reading one word at a time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
With the voice in my head and all that. And I still do most of the time.
That's how we are taught to read. That is exactly how we are taught to read.
Right. So what we should be taught is different strategies. This is one of the other things that I remember Richard telling me about years ago. I probably said this in a workshop somewhere, but he said he had like 5 or 6 different ways he could read, because for different kinds of material, he read them different ways. Yeah. He said he used to inhale novels like crazy, just one after the other, and he would do 2 things. One, he would skip over the parts that were dull and just go to the cool parts. He'd just skim over them and get whatever he needed so he could keep the story going, and just stop during the cool parts and read those really slowly, and then let the pictures and the music come up. He said he had to have music during his novel, so he had his own music. And he said he hated going to movies if he had read the book before, because his music was so much better than theirs, right? He said their music just sucked and it made the movie just terrible, and he hated it. I thought that was great. But that was one of the things he said. For technical stuff, you read a different way, and
yeah, for sure.
So,
having those choices. It would be kind of pointless to speed read or photo read a novel. Like for instance, I was reading. I saw this movie about. I think it was called Genius. I think that was the name of the movie, and it was about Thomas Wolfe, the writer. And I'd never read any Thomas Wolfe or anything, but so I got Look Homeward Angel on audio. So I was listening to it on Audible, and some of the language was
it's gorgeous,
beautiful.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And it would go on and talk about dull parts. There was no story happening in these like 5-6 pages of description. I listened about halfway through the book, and the plot had gone from like here to here. I mean,
right. It was all description, right?
Yeah.
That's style of writing. If you read some of those great writing, Updike was like that. Just describe I have one of I use as a demonstration for visual language. He's got this. It's like a 5 or 6 page description of just driving down a road, and it's so gorgeous. You could read it 100 times. It's just lovely. So I would never photo read that. It wouldn't be any fun. You could do it, but
rather pointless.
But that's the whole idea. And for some other things, so now I can skim through stuff if I'm just looking for things, and read a book very quickly if I want to. If it's just something I want to have a few ideas and just kind of get the gist of it, I'll just fly through it. But if it's something that's got a lot of detail that I want, then you don't do that. And if it's something you really want, then of course maybe you stop and take notes, right? So you have to have these different ways of doing stuff. It's like with everything that we do.
Let me just
experience do you want?
Let me just stop you, because I want to switch gears here. I want to be respectful of your time. But some questions I wanted to ask, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
That photo reading thing is just wait till I ask the question and then.
Okay. Oh, okay. Got it. Sorry. It's a linear. Okay. We're back to linear thing.
Yeah. So for many people, they go to Tony Robbins workshops these days,
Yeah.
and you learn all about Tony's stuff and Tony's technologies, as he calls it, and stuff. Right. And then they bring in Sid Jacobson.
Yeah. To teach a little NLP.
To teach a little NLP.
To whip a little NLP on these folks.
So, number one, how the heck did that come about? And number two, what do you teach them?
So there's something they call the Leadership Academy.
Okay.
And it's for people that they're going to make into their group leaders and coaches and folks like that. So it's not like a personal development workshop like the other things that they do, like the Unleash the Power and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. If it's a different course, it's an actual training course, and it's just about all NLP, really. But these folks don't know that a lot of what they're learning is NLP. They just learn these techniques. They don't know where they came from. They don't have a framework for it.
Yeah.
And Robert Dilts was teaching these for a while, and it's just 2 hours out of a 4-day thing. So it's a little 2-hour slot. And Robert was teaching it every year. And he's had a schedule conflict one year. They changed the schedule at the last minute or something. He couldn't do it. So they said, well, you got to give us a name. Who can we use instead? He said, well, call Sid. Sid will do it. So I've been doing it since then. And I guess I think I've done 8 or 9 times, something like that. And it's great fun because it's a wonderful group. They're all people who are primed and ready for whatever you're going to give them. And they've all been through all these other workshops, and they're very cohesive and they love each other. And it's just a high energy kind of experience. My goal with them is to do several things. One is to show them that what they're learning is NLP, and this is where it comes from, and here's a framework to put it in. So I explained to them a little bit about how all those rapport exercises actually work, what it is that you're doing with people, what's happening to them on the inside. They all know that you're supposed to match people's body language and stuff. They don't know why. They don't know what it's for. They don't know that to get certain parts of each person's brain kind of wired the same. They don't know that it's about creating a sense of familiarity and safety, and this is something. For a second, let me talk about this, because this is something Richard told me years ago, and I always tell them this story. He was talking to Virginia Satir one day, and he asked her a kind of a seminal question. He said, Virginia, here's something I don't understand. We're counselors, we're helping people. People come to us, and sometimes they are in big trouble by the time they get to us. And we want them to make a change. And some of these people are to the point where if they don't make a change, they're in a life-threatening situation. This could be battered women. It could be guys who are doing some really dangerous thing, or women who are doing some dangerous kind of work, right? Or whatever, battered men. It could be anything that's dangerous. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I've done a lot of talking with people here in the oil patch. Some of these plants are run very, very well. Most of them are run very, very well. They've got OSHA safety rules and everything. And some of them are skirting the rules. They're not doing a very good job, and people get hurt. And if people make a big mistake in what's called a cat cracker, it's a catalytic cracker. That's the big thing you see in an oil refinery that turns oil into gasoline. And if people make the wrong kind of mistake, it explodes. Oh. It blows up and people die and shatter windows for 30 miles in every direction. And, it's bad. So his question is, why doesn't their natural survival instinct just kick in? I mean, we're human beings. We're like other animals. Survival, is very important to us. If we're in a life-threatening situation, why wouldn't we just leave? Isn't survival the most powerful drive in human beings? And Virginia said, no. The most powerful drive in human beings is to do what's familiar over and over and over and over again, sometimes up to the point that it kills us. And I thought about that a lot, and I took that to heart, and I said, well, that must be why rapport is so important. That must be what we're doing with people when we're establishing rapport, we're creating that sense of familiarity that breeds not just trust, but also understanding. If I'm, and where does the word familiar come from? What's the root of that is family, right? So what do we learn?
Yeah.
We learn from our family how to be with other people. And if our family is safe, we're with other people, we want to create that same sense of safety. We understand the family. We understand our tribe, our group. That's what that's about.
So you spend 2 hours explaining this to Tony Robbins people?
I do not. I spend a few minutes going through this with them, and I talk about it in more detail than that. It's an interesting discussion, and it opens a lot of eyes. Then I get into some other stuff around states, and I do some things with them on submodalities. I do some things with them on change. I have a change exercise that's a fun exercise, and you could try this sometime with people. I'll just tell you how to do it. Anybody can do this. And it's one I got from somebody in London a long time ago, Ian McDermott, the trainer in London, NLP trainer. I've known for 300-400 years. And we were doing a thing at NLPU together. You know, Robert said, you know, you guys train together this afternoon. Okay, cool. So he does this exercise that I modify, but it's a great exercise. He would just have somebody come up on stage and talk about something they've been trying to change, but they haven't been effective yet. And come up with all the reasons why they should stay the same. And he says, and I'm going to act as your advocate. I'm going to help you find all the reasons why you should stay exactly the way you are and not make this change you've been trying to make. So, and it's real funny too. It's a fun thing to do because you get somebody who says, well, I'm trying to lose weight. Okay, tell me why you should stay the same. People will go, well, you know, I hate to exercise. Oh, exercise sucks. You're right. Okay, write that one down, right? Exercise is terrible. And I'd have to get up earlier in the morning and you need your sleep. No, you should sleep. Don't get up earlier. That's bad for you. You just keep doing all this stuff. I have to buy new clothes. Oh, no, that's got to be expensive. No, and what do you do with the old ones? And you just come up with all these things, but you're getting it out of the person.
Yeah.
You know, they're giving you all the things that have been stopping them, right? It's the what stops you question done on a much deeper level. And it's an interesting thing happens because after a couple of minutes of this, people will dry up. They say, well, I give you those 4 or 5. That's all I got. And you just wait a couple of seconds. And then they'll start coming up with some other ones that might be deeper. You know, like, well, people won't look at me the same way. Or my whole family's overweight, or, you know, I've always been this role, or whatever it might be. And this doesn't matter what the change is, right? It doesn't matter what it is. So learning French, moving to another town, doesn't matter. So you get all that stuff. And then you get, what are the reasons why they should change? And usually you get these intellectual things, like if somebody loses weight, I know I'll be a healthier person. Okay. You know, the doctor told me I should lose 24 pounds. Okay. You know, and my mom said they give you all this stuff that has no juice in it most of the time. And you could just see and hear the difference in the person. So I do this as an exercise where I have them get into groups of 5 or 6, everybody talk about something they've been trying to change and pick the juiciest one and work with that person. Everybody work with that person. I have them just notice what's the difference. And they see it right away. And it's not 100% of the time. Sometimes it goes a different way, but a lot of the time, you can see that all the energy the person has is around staying the same, which is why they stay the same, right? And that's their familiarity.
Oh, yeah.
So I tie it back to that, right? Good. And then I always finish them with an exercise where I do an internal submodality thing around the voices, you know, the voices that you have in your head. Because when people talk to themselves about this thing they haven't been able to do, it's often a very nasty voice. You know, they're yelling at them, say, get it, come on, you can do it, get it. What's the matter with you?
What's the matter with you?
Yeah, you're a failure. What's the matter? And all this stuff comes up, or parent voices come up. Sometimes it's not even their voice. And then I have them think about something that they know about themselves to be absolutely true and talk to themselves about that. And I have them identify the submodalities completely of each voice, the location, everything. And they're usually vastly different voices. And then talk to themselves about this thing they're trying to change in the other voice, the voice that tells them the truth, right? And the changes are profound in people just doing that exercise. So I'm tying all this stuff together the whole way. It's all a big open loops and stuff that I kind of close at the end. But it's a fun time too. And we'll have maybe 1,000 people there, and it's just great fun. It's great fun to do. So I tie all this up. I'm doing some other stuff with them as well. Sometimes I'll do another little demonstration or two. It's a pretty busy 2 hours.
Yeah, it sounds great. Sounds really cool. And when you do the modalities, have you noticed? Because I think one of the things that I've certainly noticed over the years is that different parts of NLP sort of appear as a whole new thing of like EMDR is now this is the thing we discovered.
Right.
and some modalities. I mean, I found to be true that for one of the biggest drivers in the submodalities list is location. That if you move it over here, and I think like Lucas Dirks in Belgium or wherever he's from, Denmark,
does this whole mental space thing, right?
Yeah, which is pretty much submodalities based on location.
Lucas is a bright guy.
Oh, he's great. I love it. He's been on my podcast. Wonderful man, and great stuff. Have you found that be true with the voice as well when you're doing this exercise?
They're always in different places 100% of the time.
Yeah.
They're just not always, and it's completely unpredictable. They're just in different places.
Okay.
So one could be here and one could be here, or one could be there and one could be, they could be anywhere. They're just different.
I gotcha.
And that's the only thing that I'm looking for, is for people to notice that there's a difference. And then of course the discussion afterwards, and the question becomes, I wonder how many voices you have in there.
Yeah.
And where and who they came from, and what would you like to do about all of them? The ones that are really useful, use them, and concentrate on that. I mean, I think it's important. And frankly, I mean, you do hypnosis. I mean, I use this hypnotically all the time. I always have people go back to this voice. When I'm coaching people, I do this exercise with them. I mean, a lot of them have come to me from that workshop, but others haven't. And I do this exercise with them because I want them to have that voice. I want them to identify that voice. And quite often I'll say, just close your eyes and sit back and ask that voice what it thinks about what we're talking about, or what you should do, or whatever it might be. And it's great. It helps people with decision-making tremendously.
The voice of truth.
Yeah.
That's great.
Pretty interesting thing.
And
I don't even know I don't even know how I came up with it, but it just, there it is. It's a good exercise.
I've actually heard that before, so it's I will venture to say it's been around.
I'm sure I stole it from someone. I just don't know who. I don't know who, And David or Connie Ray are watching this going, I have no idea.
I did it.
Yeah, I did.
I can't tell you how many times I've said something and somebody said, yeah, I heard Richard Bandler say that. It's like, damn it.
That's where it came from. Get out of there. Yeah. Stop it, Richard.
There's another one.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, gosh, this is a joy to be speaking with you. And as I said, both now to David and Connie Ray, I could do this all day.
Yeah, me too. You could just tell stories. Yeah.
And I do want to be respectful of your time, and also the people who've tuned in to do this. And just one more time,
sure.
A fundraiser for Marilyn and Jerry Seavey, really based in a way. It's for Jerry. He needs therapy, but she's paying for it. So thank you for contributing your time and your.
Listen, this is what we're about, I hope. I'll tell you one other quick story. This is, you ask what I do in the Tony Robbins. I always finish with this story. Years ago, I was going to the grocery store one afternoon, pulled into a parking space, no space, just empty space on each side, no cars around. And I was listening to the radio, and I wanted to continue listening. I wasn't in a hurry to get in the store. I was listening to something really cool on the radio. So I was listening. And all of a sudden my car goes, and I look over, and a woman has gotten out of her car, pulled in next to me. I didn't even notice it, and slammed her car door into my car. right? And I'm a normal human being. I'm like, what's in there? And I look over and I'm trying to get her attention. She doesn't even see me. Closes her door, starts to walk away. And I go, wait a minute. Part of me goes, time to go old lady hunting, but but I
Wow.
don't do that. So I just got out and I said, ma'am, could I speak to you for a minute? She didn't hear me. She kept walking. Ma'am, excuse me. Keeps walking. Pardon me. I'm almost shouting. And she finally hears me and turns around. Yes. And I said, can I talk to you for just a second? Sure. I said, you pulled in. I was parked right there. You pulled in right next to me. Did you know that when you opened your car door, you slammed it into my door? She goes, I did that. I mean, she honestly did not realize she had done that. And she hit it hard enough that the car bounced, right? And I said, you really didn't? No. Is it hurt? Oh my God. Is it going to be expensive to fix? Oh, let me give you some money. She starts reaching in her purse. I said, well, let's just go take a look. There was a little chip in the paint. She said, oh, but you got to have that fixed. It's going to be expensive. I said, I'm not so worried about that. I said, you really didn't notice that you did that? She said, no, I didn't know. I had no idea. I said, for you not to notice that, you must be really distracted. What's going on? And she bursts into tears. And she says, I just got this terrible phone call from my daughter. She's been rushed to the hospital. There's something very wrong. We don't know what it is. And I'm worried sick. And she asked me to go pick up her kids. She's got little kids. I've got to get some food at the store. I've got to cook them dinner, pack them each a bag, pack her a bag. I got to drop them off. I've got to take her stuff down to the hospital. I'm worried sick. I don't know what's wrong. And I'm just at my wit's end. And I said, I'm really sorry that's happened to you. I said, but I have another problem with you right now. She said, what? I said, as distracted as you are, you just told me you're going to be driving around with little kids in your car. I said, I don't want you to do that. You could have an accident. You're in no shape to drive. She goes, you're right. I said, I know. So here's what I'd like you to do. So you have a pen and paper in your purse? She says, yes. So you see this coffee house over here? It's a little coffee. It's a local Starbucks. It's called PJ's. Good little coffee house. She said, yeah. So you see PJ's? I want you to go into PJ's and I want you to order a cup of coffee or don't order a cup of coffee. They don't care. You go sit in there. There's always soft jazz playing. It's a calming place. I want you to sit down and write down everything you need to do. Get all that stuff out of your head onto a piece of paper. Who do you need to call? What do you need to do? Get yourself organized. And in 10 minutes, you'll be in a much better state. And then you can go take care of all this stuff in a much better way. Does that sound like a good idea to you? She said, yes, thank you. That's a really great idea. I'm going to go do that. And she walked over and I said, and good luck to you. I'm sorry this happened. Good luck to your family. I think that that's who we are. That's what we're wired for, right? If we're in NLP, we didn't get into NLP just to take people's money, to be better salespeople. I mean, some people did, but most of us got into it because we care about other people. We want to help people. I'm that guy who's irritating to people because if I see somebody in a bad state, I'm not going to leave them like that. Even if it's a stranger who just dented my door or just chipped the paint in my door. I don't care. If I see somebody like that, I'm going to say, what's going on? You need some help? Something wrong? Can I do something? And I know that I'll have something I can give to that person that I've learned over the years that will help them at least a little bit. And I know that when we're struggling, we've got a whole bunch of stuff bouncing around in our head. We need to externalize that stuff because there's too much going around and we get confused. And getting it out on paper is just a quick, easy way to do that. So I wanted to give that to her. I'm that guy, like Connie Ray, like David, like you, and all the other people that you're going to interview. We're those people who would step up when somebody needs help. So talking to you for an hour is a joy besides doing something good for somebody. And I don't think there would be any other answer than, sure, what time do you want to see me? Right. And I hope we get to do this again, Doug. It's always great fun to talk with you.
Great. Well, thank you, my friend.
You too. Thanks very much.
This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.